With just a couple weeks to go until Breath of the Wild, GameInformer's covers a whole lot about the big, bold new Zelda adventure, and a lot of details have come out of said coverage. Now, some of them are spoiler centric, and so we will save those till the end of the video in case you don't want to hear that. We'll save them till the end, and we will make it very clear when that discussion will begin. But to start things off, I'm your host Zach, and we've got Jake and Gabe here talking about a bunch of Zelda features. So I'm going to run through this list. GameInformer is where this full article will be found for this gorgeous cover story, by the way. You guys like this art?
It's beautiful. And also one more thing, just to source where we're like reading off the bullet points, there's a thread on NeoGaf that summarized it really, really well. So if you want to go check that out, you can.
Yes. All right. So we'll just start from the top and kind of give our takes on this stuff and dive into the new info, because it's been quite a while since this much content has come from Zelda, which, by the way, went gold, I believe, yesterday. And so they are locked and loaded for launch. Okay, so it says, Nintendo previously made Zelda games by making small areas and connecting them together. For Breath of the Wild, the team first had to figure out what needed to be placed on the map. Groups were created out of the over 300 devs to work on specific sections of the world, which I think is interesting that they're kind of given different areas. But I like that, because then perhaps we'll still have a unified world, but one that has diverse areas, which I think is critical and something I love. Yeah, but I just mean more, the Great Plateau has been the focus of all the video coverage, except for some trailer bits. So their demo began at a stable, and I actually, when I was at the New York event, got sort of a developer-guided walkthrough of the stable system and the horse system. Here they say Link can rest in the bed and restore health at the stable. You can store your horses, meet with merchants and NPCs. Stables basically are kind of like mini little hubs, again, because they're located throughout the world. There are merchants and NPCs there. You can rest and restore health, and you can store horses, because if you weren't aware, in Breath of the Wild, you're able to sort of pick a horse, ride said horse to the stable, register the horse, name the horse, and make that horse your own. And I think that's kind of a cool system. And you can find horses that have different characteristics throughout the world, different, stamina, different, obviously, color schemes, and so it's pretty cool. I want to know, how many people are going to just trash all of their horses when you eventually get Epona, or if they're going to, find their own favorite.
my horses are getting trashed as soon as I find Epona, so that's just me.
You're a worthless human for sacrificing the horses, Gabe.
Absolutely. But this next point, Zach, is actually the one I wanted to talk about a little bit. Did you mention that each one of these is run by a distinct character, also the stables? That's not the point I was trying to make, though. You can, rest at these stables, and you can, eventually, get a better, more expensive bed, and you have an extra heart in the morning, which I'm assuming isn't permanent, but I think
it says that you can't recover it.
Yeah, I think that's
they're yellow hearts, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to the fact that they really implemented some, what I would call, survival or open world elements here, in the form of the hot cold meter, in the form of the, the sound meter, in the form of, being
Cooking.
able to upgrade all sorts of things that allow you upgrading beds, getting, temporary hearts, things that are survivability focused instead of just traditional, grab an upgrade, move on, grab an upgrade, move on. This is more interacting with the world and approaching how you choose, right? Because you don't need to delve into that cooking system. You don't need to dive into this bed system. But it's cool that it's there, and I think it speaks to how fleshed out the world is.
Well, I think you need to cook to regain health.
But you technically don't need to.
Yeah, but it's a huge help. I think everyone's going to cook. We're all
how much you focus on it, I guess, is more what I meant.
Okay.
Spending time by fires in the world passes time. There's a dynamic weather system in the game, with the world reacting as a result.
That sounds really cool, especially the next point, which I'll let you read. Yeah,
when it starts raining, it says NPCs outside the stable go quickly inside, which, that's very cool.
Not that point. I meant the next one. Sorry.
It says you have to be careful during a thunderstorm since your metal items can attract thunder. And this was something that, again, during my time with the game that they mentioned, was that there's a little indicator that shows in your inventory what of your equipables is made of metal.
Stuff like that I think is just so cool. Because, if you didn't know these things, like to me, like you see like Breath of the Wild, and it just looks like a bigger Zelda game, like more open world and like just bigger. But like these like intricate details that they're adding and making it so much more complex and so much like basically like Zelda times like 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just love how fleshed out things are, and that there is these environmental factors, like we mentioned, whether it's temperature or now lightning, that can take you out. And even enemies react to sort of elements, and I didn't see it with weather, but I did see enemies close to water get hit with a fire arrow and then run to water to cool off. So there is a lot of AI reaction to what's going on around them, which I think is super cool. They mentioned that Beetle is back to sell you goods, which I think we've seen a concept art or something of him. So that was already confirmed. It says metal weapons and shields can be discarded or thrown at enemies because Link can get killed by lightning, so you really do need to pay attention and be careful during these thunderstorms. It says difficulty dips and spikes depending on where you are, since you can go around it and avoid it until you're stronger, which is something I saw as well. There were certain enemies that were approachable, but not beatable at that point. I mean, maybe they were beatable, but very, very tough
Not
battle.
something that you want to do.
Yeah, the rock monster from E3 was a good example. Like, you had a very hard time with him because you didn't go get the sword that I got before I fought him. So
Yeah, and in my case at the New York event, the guy fought a guardian just to show it off, but was killed in one hit. Mm-hmm. So he also found a very large enemy that he had to run away from because he said the damage he would deal would be way too great for his current current stats or current armor or current weaponry, which I think is really cool. They reiterate there's over 100 shrines, which we already learned from the strategy guide. It says you can find an item that identifies shrines and discover a shrine for it to be a fast travel point. Now, I'm not sure if it states anywhere, but I do wonder also if the stables serve as fast travel or not, if they're just places of rest and recovery.
yeah, it doesn't say anything, so I don't want to assume that it is. So.
Sure, but it could be. Shrines also give a spirit orb. You can trade in orbs for unknown items, which is cool. A dedicated team handled the animal AI.
Fantastic.
Bears, wolves, deer move through the snow. You can kill all those creatures, and they all exist in the world.
If you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
So Gabe.
Yeah.
No. What are you doing? That's not true.
You can get overrun by enemies quickly, which I have seen, and they would not. When I was speaking with the guided sort of walkthrough, they wouldn't confirm, but I did ask, are there instances where you can cause, multiple factions to duke it out, or at least get in a big battle that involves multiple enemies of different types? And he would not confirm nor deny it, but he said at one point there was something in the background that he tried to draw our attention away from as like a hint. So I'm guessing that's what it was. And I'm guessing there are instances where that overwhelm can be via multiple mobs or multiple groups of enemies around the world. And I think that's going to be super cool. And I do wonder at the border or like the sort of the transition point of areas, like if you could get certain enemy types to follow, chase you, and then duke it out with other enemy types. I really do wonder how I feel like there's some cool lore implications to find out what enemies are aligned,
Yeah, they're gangs out here, so you got to be very careful.
Link can keep multiple horses at a time. Affection loyalty is important with horses.
Gabe, you hear that? Affection loyalty is important. Yeah. You can't just discard them.
I'm very affectionate and loyal until I get up in a...
You can feed and take care of horses to raise their stats. You can call the horses over to you, but they need to be within a certain proximity to be called. And horses can be killed by enemies.
That's not nice.
It's interesting also that the horses, like, you can land on them from above, so you can glide down and land on them, which is cool. And I just like the idea that you could register and name them. I feel like it gives so much more of your own input or your own, like your own experience.
I can't wait to have my horses named Zachary and Jake to be put to work.
There you go. They will be your most whipped and weathered horses.
Yes.
Horses can be killed. Aonuma wanted players to choose their own paths. There's no companion character in this game, but there's some interesting things about Zelda, which in case... I'm going to leave that for the spoiler section.
Okay.
Let's see. The stamina meter encompasses sprinting, paragliding, and climbing, which we have seen used extensively, and I think is my favorite feature in the game. The fact that Link now has access to a litany of moves that normally he would have been ground bound. So the meter can be upgraded, but Nintendo won't say how. And so this here, again, really factors into that open world survival type style. I'm guessing that there is some sort of item or some sort of trial/shrine completion that is required to get upgrades. Or who knows, maybe even those orbs they're talking about, it says you can discover these spirit orbs. Maybe those can be eventually cashed in, but it is an optional upgrade, it sounds like. Which again, you
have to cook the fanciest meal in the forest.
Yeah.
To upgrade.
Yeah.
You have to get all the horses and then sell off all the horses.
No, why?
For some extra stamina. No, but I do like that. That not only are you going to find items and better weapons and better swords, but that your actual interaction with the world, because now you're Metroidvania. In theory, you're doing that a little bit, right? Because now there's places that you didn't have enough stamina to climb that you can go back and climb, and I hope that there are some secrets and or sweet locations that are hidden and gated based on stamina meter. I think that would be cool.
I didn't even think of that. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Different shields have different speeds and level of control for snowboarding because you can't throw your shield down and ride it. And this again just speaks to the level of craftsmanship and detail. Different shields have different speeds and level of control. So there is not just one snowboarding model, right, that's applied to all shields, but the different shields create a different experience as you cruise down the mountains, which again, how cool is that?
Awesome.
You can mine rocks, which can be sold for rupees or used for crafting. Throwing a little Minecraft in there. You can place stamps to mark areas of interest. 100 of these symbols can be used on the map, including sword, shield, bow and arrow, pot, star, chest, skull, leaf, diamond.
It's a lot of different types of.
So basically, you get to make your own
map.
Waypoints and map.
Yeah,
which is, I guess, cool.
And we've done that in a demo.
Yeah, so you can kind of lay out and sort of create your own path through the world. Like, okay, here's an area that's too tough right now. Here's an area I want to come back to, and I like that you can throw 100 down. Waypoint systems with 1 or 2 waypoints are.
You have to make
norm,
a key for yourself in a notebook or
Exactly.
something, so you don't forget.
This is fulfilling Miyamoto and Aonuma's desire to be map makers.
Yes.
Anyhow, every style of weapon has a unique set of animations and feel different, which that is crazy because even in the limited demos we've played, we've seen very weird things like brooms, garden hose.
Well, the funny thing is
swords.
But all those are one style. Like the brooms, the mops, and the garden hose, I think those are all one style. So I don't think that every single weapon has a different animation. It's just by category, I think.
Okay.
At least that's what I'm getting from this quote. So
yeah, it could be category. If you're going to break them down, but regardless, it is awesome that they have so much variety in the weapons, and it's not just swords, axes, and spears. There's weird stuff.
Yeah.
Like we said, like a broom or a mop, or I'm sure eventually as you move into the the snowy territories or the Goron areas, there might be even crazier weapons.
Yeah.
There's no invincible weapons in the game.
This is strange because everybody assumes the Master Sword is in the game. Onuma has mentioned the Master Sword in interviews. So
Right.
What does that mean? Do you constantly got to be repairing the Master Sword? Is the Master Sword not in the game? Which I think it is. Or maybe he's just lying. I don't know. But
because weapons do deteriorate. Not super quickly, but quickly in this game. There is an encouragement to constantly find replacements and constantly keep a stockpile of valuable weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Master Sword is just used like a key because it looks so rugged and beat up in all the pictures that he can't use it as an actual sword, so he just keeps it as a key.
Nah, I really want to kill things with that, not people.
Or perhaps it has a very long life cycle.
Maybe.
And so it just takes 300 strikes to rust or something. I don't know.
Hopefully more than 300 strikes.
We will save the Zelda point for the spoiler section in a minute. Players can see the ending without seeing everything from the story. We've heard that before. But it says a certain element was added in the game to make for a more cohesive story. I'm still very interested, and it won't be in my first run, but I'm still very interested to see what all is how is it crafted so that you can reach the ending and make everything else optional. I really do want to know how they have this exact thing, how they have justified the story.
Yeah, I have no idea.
You would imagine that things Link encounters, things Zelda and him experience would factor into sort of the ending cutscenes. So if you go straight there, is that just all removed, or is it just set up in such a perfectly handcrafted way that, for example, Zelda's waiting there with Ganon because now they say she's trapped with Ganon because that happens, but now you don't see how it happens. It just is there. You know what I mean? Something of that nature.
This is all just speculation, and I don't want to know. I don't care to theorize about it. Like, that's not how I'm going to play the game. So
sure. Now, this is all of the sort of general stuff. There is a giant or a sizable chunk on the dungeon and also on Zelda, and so we're going to gate that behind a spoiler wall. But before we do that, any takeaways from this list or any things that you find incredibly exciting?
It's incredibly intricate and huge and amazing, and I can't wait to play it.
Yeah, there's a lot of systems in play here, which, again, we kind of knew, but now not in this much detail, so I'm just hyped. So you can move us on to the spoiler thing.
Very, very good. If you guys have any thoughts on any of these points, definitely let us know in the comments below. But right now, we are going to spoiler it up. And they're not very specific.
Yeah, it's not like story spoilers or anything.
Yeah, it's not story spoilers. It's more detail of a dungeon and of some Zelda stuff. So we are going to do that. If you want to leave the video now, perfectly fine. But there will be some of this spoilery stuff in 3, 2, 1. Okay,
Link is a girl. No.
Here's where things get really interesting. Nintendo took GameInformer directly to a dungeon, and the dungeon is constantly moving. So there's been this emphasis that getting to the dungeon or entering the dungeon will be just as fun or as difficult as the dungeon itself, which I think is such a unique and for me, a hard to visualize concept.
So it's like a giant, like, Titan, like, moving thing? Like, Howl's
I'm
Moving
thinking
Castle?
like Doctor Strange, where like everything is just constantly moving.
Or like Howl's Moving Castle, if you catch up to it, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, to me, it's either like shifting throughout the world, or like you said, it's some sort of living creature or a machine, right?
Yeah, it says that
Well, the next point says it's a mechanism, so...
Yeah, Link must manipulate the entire enormous mechanism through his own ingenuity. So yeah, maybe it is just a giant, like, walker beast, and like a huge guardian. Anyhow, players can skip dungeons if they want and go straight to Calamity Ganon. And the substance known as Malice covers the dungeon. Link gets hurt if he touches it. It can be destroyed by finding and attacking each pocket of Malice's eyeball. The Sheikah Slate serves as Link's map, binoculars, and more. So there is no signature like compass or map or things like that.
that we know of.
We know of.
Yeah, I mean they might be in the game for the. I mean, I'm sure there'll be like maps for the. I mean, yeah, like dungeon maps and stuff. I assume that's still in the game.
Well, they say that the way it's approached here is that the Sheikah Slate will be inserted or attached somewhere to like download it. That it's not traditionally like chest and item.
Oh, sure.
Whatever. So there is that traditional sound. They say GameInformer didn't see the familiar chest opening animation signature music.
They didn't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Sure, at least in this dungeon it wasn't. They never found a signature item. Now.
So
do you take this to mean that
like no grappling hook, no boomerang, like
And they did experiment with this a bit in Between Two Worlds, or Link Between Worlds, with sort of the item shop system, and that you were able to access the dungeons
whenever.
Right. But this sounds more like the items are not there at all. At least that's this thing. We know that there are things that are acquirable via the shrines and whatnot. We've seen like the magnetism and those different power abilities, right? So there is stuff of that sort, but do you think there's any chance that there's none of the traditional items?
I
don't think... Are we not guaranteed to get...
I don't think there's any chance that there isn't like a boomerang in the game or a hook shot. I think they're in the game, maybe just not in the traditional sense. Maybe there's a bunch of boomerangs. Maybe there's a bunch of hook shots.
Or maybe it's just like you don't collect it. Maybe it's just like something you pick up and use like in the dungeon and then like drop it and don't like carry it with you or something. So it's like a permanent collectible, just like stuff is scattered around that you have to use kind of.
Yeah, I mean maybe. And that's the other cool thing about Breath of the Wild. Like so much of this is like this is a very different Zelda game. Not just in the sense that it's open world and there's all these new systems in play. Also, like structurally, they're messing with a lot of stuff. So, like that's what makes it like so exciting.
And they do say a simpler approach with dungeons in Breath of the Wild, which I think isn't. I mean, that's a very hard statement to define. What does that mean? A simpler approach? There was some analysis in the NeoGAF article of saying that they want the objective to be clear, but the fun and the difficulty is figuring out the puzzles and the parts of the dungeon that will get you to that. So they're not going to be as massive or as winding as dungeons in Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword, but that they will be puzzle driven and still be enjoyable and tricky, that it just won't be of the same, maze-like scope of the past.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting.
A lot of interesting stuff, really. Like, another, like, just small tidbit that all bombs are now remote and don't blow up on a timer. Like, even that, it's like, it's a change. So
right, and it does say that the slate is used as a 3D, could give you a 3D model of the dungeon, so you can tilt the entire dungeon and look around it. Doing so slides blocks into place and opens up angles you can use to paraglide to new locations. So it sounds like maybe you're able to manipulate the dungeon in some ways from this map.
Yeah.
A voice tells you that you need to access terminals of the slate across the dungeon marking map. So yeah, it sounds like you're accessing terminals and then affecting the dungeon in some way. It says that Windblight Ganon was the boss here, and a voice says it's one of Ganon's own. It plays dirty. He's a huge monster, no face, gun-like arm, and he can create tornadoes and fire large spikes. So still a very themed boss. I mean, he's Windblight Ganon, so it sounds like it's a wind-themed dungeon with a wind-themed boss. I do think it's interesting, though, that, in the past, to me, my most memorable Zelda moments are dungeons, right? And thinking about, whether it's the water temple or this temple or whatever, kind of removing a little bit of that.
But I think we're getting like more like boss fights and stuff. Like, just maybe every boss fight isn't in a dungeon now.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen the titled and the health barred bosses in the world.
Yeah, it seems like there's like wandering bosses too. I think it's
right,
just,
and it seems like they've kind of like, if you picture it like, if everything before was like folded into these very fine lines, now they've kind of unwrapped that, and so it does simplify things in some ways, but also just the extrapolation, further complicates things, because now you have to worry about, cooking, you have to worry about temperature, you have to worry about lightning, but maybe the dungeon isn't as interwoven with, complexity. So I think there's like a give and take there. Ultimately, though, the game to me feels more deep and more complex, even if the dungeons themselves are not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still excited for it. As a very long time Zelda fan, like, yes, dungeons are a big part of it, but no one has said that some of the shrines are difficult. Like, I don't think that everything's just going to be like super easy. Like, I
don't think simple means easy is what I take away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, maybe.
And what is this whole thing about finding the dungeons, and encountering them being just as enjoyable as the actual dungeon
Again,
itself?
I think it's like, but from what it sounds like it's like a giant robot that's like moving throughout the land on its own timer.
Maybe.
Which then, a little Shadow of the Colossus type thing or something?
That's what it sounds like to me, at least.
Which I think is cool. And then, again, speaking to that point of just because there's a little bit more, whatever you want to call it, simplicity, I guess, is what they're referring to in this dungeon approach. Aonuma talks about Zelda as a character and how reactive she is in the game. She has a lot of different emotions. You can discover different sides of her. She'll get mad at you and scold you rather than be passive. Players might completely miss out on these details depending on what they choose to ignore. So even though there's no companion character, it does give the impression that you will be spending a considerable amount of time with Zelda, and not just in cutscenes, because if you're able to ignore or discover different emotions or things, it sounds like she is going to be following you around for at least a part of the game.
That's what I was gonna ask that question too. No companion, but then it sounds like Zelda's your teammate or companion.
And we have seen what to me looks like different sort of, I don't want to say evolutions, but almost evolutions of Zelda. You see her in more, weak and princess-like dresses, but then eventually in a very similar to Link, blue tunic style.
Yeah, she gets a tunic eventually. So I don't know what that's all about. But
any chance there's a character swap?
No.
Is there a chance? I suppose, but
I don't think so.
Yeah,
You don't think there's a section where Link gets captured or kidnapped by Ganon and you have to play through a shrine or something as Zelda?
I don't think so. But it's not.
How cool
it's
would
not
that be, though?
very cool. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't think it happens.
I'm hoping it's more like it sounds more like an Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite kind of evolution. I don't know how much she'll be able to interact with you and like help you collect things or do things, but like sort of that Zelda will have her own like evolution and like character development throughout the game as you progress as like your companion for at least some of it. And I wonder how that works if like you pick her up at one point and then like in terms of like skipping over things or missing things, like can you drop her off or could you like completely miss her or Because if you can go like directly to the end at the beginning, like then you completely miss out like that. I don't know. It's a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
And just how that all works with a story and a game progression that is completely skippable. I don't know. We'll have to make a run at it.
Only one way to know.
Eventually.
Play it.
Yeah. March 3rd. I did want to say that, I think in their effort to make this a sort of new vision of Zelda or a reinvigorated Zelda, over 100 shrines, right? So even if you're disappointed in the dungeons, that there's only supposedly 4 main dungeons, that there's a simpler approach, they're not as complex, convoluted, or large as post-Twilight Princess dungeons, over 100 shrines, you add that all together, I mean, how many dungeons does that equal to? So maybe this just speaks to people's shorter attention span and creating a bigger world with more variety as opposed to, longer, specific instanced, rooms, buildings, dungeons, whatever. Take these 100, add them together, divide them all up. It's got to be more dungeons than what we've seen previously, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100 shrines is a lot, and granted, most of them probably won't be very big, but yeah, as long as there's like some type of like puzzle element to them, I'll be fine. Like, if it all equals out to like 5-6 dungeons, like that's more or less how many there are in Zelda games for the most part.
Well, if
there's not.
Going off of what this says, and the voice says like it's one of Ganon's own. It plays dirty, and it's Windblight Ganon as the boss, and like. It says that you like have to go through the dungeon and then get to the top, and then you fight Windblight Ganon in open air, and it's kind of like a themed wind boss. Like then you have to imagine that there's at least a few more dungeons that are like set dungeons like that with a piece of Ganon boss sort of thing. So I mean, in addition to the shrines, there's got to be 2 to 3 more dungeons at least.
I mean, we're still gonna get a Zora dungeon for the these things that are like traditional. I don't think that they're just not in the game whatsoever. So
yeah, I don't know if the dungeons. I mean, the fact if the dungeons are all moving like this, I don't know that we get. I don't know that the themes are based on I mean, maybe.
Well, they said that this one's moving. I don't know why we're assuming all of them are.
I just meant from the statement that Aonuma said that they are putting a lot of effort into making sure the approach to the dungeons are unique and fun, so getting into the dungeon is fun or more fun than the dungeon itself.
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
It could be like underwater or something and difficult to get into it and not moving or something. I
do think it'll be really interesting to see the satisfaction level of the shrines. And we've seen a couple of them, and they supposedly vary quite a bit in size. So, from single rooms to multi-rooms to, very easy and a little bit more challenging. It'll be interesting to see. But I think there's enough content to satisfy. One last thing I want to point out, we're talking about Zelda being kind of an accompaniment to Link and maybe even having some sort of evolution from sort of helpless to very helpful. Do you think that this image on the cover of this Master Sword would in any way indicate that transition? She's wearing the more flowy princess dress. Link giving her a transfer of power or her gaining some power from the Master Sword?
I don't know. That might be reading a little too much into it.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, and also, this isn't like official like Nintendo Zelda. I think this was commissioned, GameInformer said. So,
okay.
Yeah, like the cover was like commissioned or something, so.
Alrighty, well, regardless, there is a lot to look forward to, and I think it's exciting that we don't have an exact layout of what this is going to be like. And the idea that you can complete the story and ignore most of it, just so unique. Supposedly in this thing as well, Aonuma talks about he had a secret idea from 20 years ago that is somehow related to the storyline presentation, and like multiple endings or some way of uniquely crafting the story that is implemented in Breath of the Wild. And just the fact that you can face the final boss right from the get-go, you can beat it. You don't need to complete other things. So there's no like requisite items.
Yeah, and again, I don't think that's easy to do. I'm sure you can do it. I don't think it's easy to do at all. I don't think that you or Jake or I and like the masses is going to be able to just go straight to the final boss and like see the ending. Like I don't think that's happening.
And I do want to clarify one more time, in case we didn't make it clear, that GameInformer was not allowed to find or see the dungeon from the exterior. They were teleported into the dungeon directly to play through it without knowing the full context of how to get there, where it was, what it was. So again, that's very interesting to me that
Less than a month away, and they're still so secretive about so much.
Good. Be secretive. Stop telling us.
Gabe just wants to get off and play.
Yes.
And it's such an interesting structure, and I'm just so excited to see how it all pans out. And I feel like even once we start playing it, we won't really have the full grasp of this until we beat it, and maybe not even then.
Yeah, you got to beat it a couple times in a couple different ways or something. I don't know.
Very exciting, very interesting. Let us know your favorite ideas or your favorite new concepts here in this information. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be just a game of games. So very excited for it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure to hit that notification bell if you want to stay up to date on the latest and greatest from the Switch and Breath of the Wild. And until next time, we are so close. So close, my friends. So for myself, Jake, and Gabe, Switch Force out.